Welcome everyone, Kostini here with a discussion about Kislev in patch 4.0 for Shadows of Change in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, before I go into the details, I do need to specify that I'm kind of walking a very fine line and I might be going over it with this video. DLC generally have embargoes for content creators. We get free copies, we can play early, but we do have to follow certain rules. Now, Creative Assembly did not specify that we are not allowed to show footage of Kislev. They did specify that we cannot show off footage for Mother Estancia and also the new units, etc. So, with that in mind, I think this is kind of like a gray area where they don't want you to talk about Kislev right now, or rather they don't want you to talk about Mother Estancia and implicitly Kislev. To Creative Assembly, if you're watching this video and you think it violates the spirit of that embargo, please let me know, I will remove the video. But there are things I do need to talk about. Now, this is not a review. I do have a lot of perspectives on this DLC, some of which I have shared already, but I will be doing a full review when I am able to, when I'm allowed to, because I do have a lot of things to say. But let's take a look at Kislev. Let's take a look at the things they have changed, the things they should have changed from my perspective and didn't, as well as the problems that Kislev has had since the launch of the game. Certainly since the launch of Immortal Empires, but really since the launch of the game. So what has changed for Kislev in Kislev? For Katrin, Kastaltin, and Boris Ursus? Well, for Boris Ursus, nothing. Except the new units and their availability, his campaign is exactly the same. For Katrin and Kastaltin, quite a few things have indeed changed. Katrin and Kastaltin now start with 2 settlements as opposed to 1. So, Kastaltin used to start with Erengrad at tier 1. He now at tier 2. He now starts with it at tier 1, which is similar to what Katrin starts. He does, however, start with Castle Alexandrinov at tier 2, and he does have his barracks there, which means he can get that to tier 2 pretty quickly and start pumping out armor cossars. And it's very easy for Kastaltin to deal with the initial Kislev faction over here, and then go wipe out Frot, and then potentially wipe out the Druzina Enclave. Or he can pick a fight with Azazel, like declare war on Azazel on turn 1, and so on. For Katrin, the situation is she still starts with Kislev as tier 1, but her barracks has been moved from Kislev City to Zavastra. And the army she initially faces has been moved over here near Vitevo, and we also have the regional changes to talk about. So, the Southern Oblast and Troll Country now have 4 regions, also same with the Eastern Oblast. So Kislev is now made up of the 3 big cities and the 3 oblasts, with 4 regions in the oblasts and a proper provincial capital in each of them. This is a significant buff as I see it, because it means that, for instance, the Druzina Enclave, while they will certainly still be wiped out by Frot pretty quickly on Legendary, it will take longer and there is a significant level of protection. So Kislev territory is actually more useful. Kislev did need provincial capitals to make these settlements worth it, because before they were not worth it at all. There's also a new landmark over here for Kastaltin, specifically in Castle Alexandrinov, that gives him the ability of recruiting Tsarguard and the Griffin Legion. The Druzina Enclave also gets the settlement of Plesk over here. Those are the terrain changes. I've covered those already. What else has been changed for Kislev? Pretty much nothing. You can make of that what you will. But when I'm looking at Kislev, here's what the changes entail. Churches no longer cost devotion to produce. So if we're looking at buildings, we can see that churches no longer have any devotion. There is a new building chain that does involve all the new units that are in the DLC. So if you want those, you have to get that building. All the landmarks in the cities of Kislev, which used to cost devotion, and that was actually a significant problem given the devotion issues in the campaign, no longer cost devotion. Though I believe the cost of certain buildings has been increased. Not the special buildings, I think they just removed the devotion cost, but the cost of churches has doubled, if I am Or I could be very wrong on that. I think it might just actually be the same cost as before. So they just removed the devotion cost of churches. But the problems of Kislev haven't really been fixed. The terrain changes certainly make the campaign area more useful, but it's still a miserable situation because you have so many legendary lords to deal with. And Kislev is just not equipped to deal with these challenges. And even when you deal with these challenges, Kislev is still too weak to deal with the overall campaign compared to other races. Like, I've had many successful campaigns as Kislev. I've steamrolled this entire section of the map as Boris Ursus before. But even as Boris Ursus, even with mods, you do just encounter the limitations that Kislev does have. So what are those limitations? Well, first off, let me say that I'm not necessarily appreciative of what they did for Katrin, because she still has a very difficult early game battle. And what's even worse now, I'd argue, is like, if you just play her turn normally and you don't get Root Marcher, you will not be able to take Vitevo. That's the first thing to mention. You do need to specifically get Root Marcher in order to take this element. If you not, you will be in hostile territory, unable to recruit with her. So you do need to take Vitevo. But after that, yeah, you do just have to fight over Fort Jakova. That's obviously more difficult because it is now a provincial capital that you do have to deal with. They have added new quests for quite a bunch of legendary lords that you can do, and obviously those will be very, very beneficial to doing. I'd say that's one of the more positive changes with regards to the DLC that we have seen. But here's where the problems start coming in for Kislev as a race, as a faction. Now, these issues may not affect Mother Ostankia, but these are issues Katrin, Kastaltin, and Boris Ursus do have to deal with. So what are those issues? First off, the economy of Kislev is pathetically weak. You spend 1,000 gold to get 100 income. It takes 10 turns to justify the cost of this building. And that's just tier 1. It's always 10 times more than what you're getting. And in fact, at tier 4 from a provincial capital, it's not even that. It's even more than that. Though, of course, it does increase the tradable resources by quite a significant amount. The problem with playing a race with a weak economy, especially one as Kislev, which has a lot of threats to deal with, is its armies, its upgrading settlements, it's building things. That's the limitation that Kislev does have and has had since the launch of the game. It's not like this is new information. People have been complaining about the weak Kislev economy since the very launch of Warhammer 3. And nothing has been seemingly done to fix that. The devotion cost removal is welcome and very much appreciated, but without an economic change. These structures should easily cost half of what they do. All of them, like the farmstead should be 250 or even 200, but significantly cheaper than what they are right now. The only reason Kislev can't afford anything is because they fight so many battles and they actually have good post-battle loot. But consider Kislev versus the Greenskins. The Greenskins earn a lot of more money from base economy and post-battle loot. I guess the argument is made that you can trade as Kislev, but it's not really good enough, and trade only works when you get a lot of trade resources, which you do have a better situation in the territory of Kislev right now, but what hasn't changed is the campaign dynamic, where the best thing for Kislev to do is to go conquer the Empire. The Ostermark, Sylvania, Midland, Talabekland is still very much the game plan. You're not really feeling you're playing a campaign as Kislev, you're feeling like you're playing a kind of pseudo-imperial campaign, really. Don't get me started on the issues of the Empire. So that's where we are at. That's the first issue, the first major issue. There are two other significant problems. The second issue is the devotion situation. The problem with devotion is that devotion costs escalate the more territory you gain. So the more territory you take control, the more territory, the more the cost of devotion goes up. And devotion is pretty meaningless as a system. Because really, if you're playing Catra and Castalton or even Boris Ursus, for most of your campaign, if not all of it for Catra and Castalton, you're going to be invoking Urson, because it gives you 5 supporters when you gain a territory. And you need this for the supporter race. So everything else here is not really worth getting, unless you can afford it. And even then, all you'd do otherwise would be to invoke Dash because of the income benefit at 8% income. In contrast, Cafe has like an 8% income benefit. So the devotion cost is very significant. What's worse, what also happens is that you cannot gain devotion from things like Skaven, which you will be fighting, Greenskins, or even Draika, I'd argue, should give you devotion. And certainly the vampire counts. Instead, you can only gain devotion for fighting Chaos, Warriors of Chaos, Norska, Demons of Chaos. That hampers your campaign in a significant amount. It's not like devotion is plentiful. While certainly the situation is improved, the escalating cost of devotion for invocations is something that does make it worse. So that's the second big issue that Kislev does have. The devotion issue is integral to their success. It is a necessity to get devotion in a campaign, though they have certainly changed it from being something you need for structures to just being something to get supporters, effectively, and campaign buffs, though it's really mainly supporters. Even for Boris Ursus, who doesn't need to build supporters, you still want to get it, because you can gain temporary buffs of growth or control, and also leadership, which is important. That's the second major issue that has not been addressed in this DLC with this patch. The third major issue is something that specifically affects Catherine and Castalton, their victory conditions, and their campaign dynamics. So Catherine and Castalton want to build up supporters because they ultimately want to confederate one another. There's a lot of benefits in holding the special Kislevite cities. Catherine starts with one, Catherine starts with one, Castalton starts with the other. Prague is the free-for-all. Boris Ursus can confederate all of them, and that's why Boris Ursus is far superior to Catherine and Castalton. Catherine and Castalton cannot confederate one another until they gain those 600 supporters. Now that's not too unreasonable, though you can do it. You can confederate significantly faster in a campaign if you didn't have to deal with the supporter limitations. Even worse is that your short campaign victory condition is something that requires 600 supporters. The issue with that is that you're quite likely to achieve the long campaign victory conditions before you achieve the short campaign victory conditions. And you don't want the short campaign victory condition for the hero capacity and obviously to unlock long campaign victory conditions. And the endgame crisis can be tied to long campaign victory condition, you fulfilling those objectives. So what you end up is with a slower campaign with significantly more limitations than what you're dealing with as Boris Ursus. These were the 3 big issues that needed to be fixed, that needed to be improved on. From my point of view, I've talked about these for quite a bit before. I've done multiple videos on the subject. Nothing has changed. And that is all there is to say on the subject. I'll be honest, I expected more from Creative Assembly. My overall perspective of the DLC, this is not a review of the DLC because there's a lot more to be said on the subject that I will be able to say when I can do a review. But this is just going over the various changes and the lack of them that Creative Assembly has made for Kislev in this patch. Kostin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.